20 inches of rain in a single weekend. That is not a typo, and that is not an exaggeration from some random weather blog. That number is coming straight from the National Hurricane Center and the Central Pacific Hurricane Center, aimed directly at the island paradise millions of people dream about visiting. Hawaii, the place of white sand beaches, turquoise water, and postcard sunsets, is staring down a weekend that could turn deadly. Somewhere between now and Sunday, a storm most people had never heard of a few days ago could dump enough water to trigger flash floods, mudslides, and power outages lasting days. So stick with me for the next few minutes, because this is not just another weather update. This is the story of how a quiet ocean disturbance turned into one of the most dangerous forecasts Hawaii has faced in years. Let's rewind for a second and understand what we are actually dealing with here. What started as a disorganized area of low pressure far out in the Pacific Ocean has been steadily strengthening. Meteorologists gave it the name Potential Tropical Cyclone 1C, and by the time you are watching this, it is expected to have already become a full tropical storm, one that will carry the name Lala. According to the Central Pacific Hurricane Center, this system has a very high chance, around 90%, of becoming a fully organized tropical cyclone within the next 2 days. That kind of confidence from official forecasters is not something to brush off. When hurricane specialists start using numbers like that, it usually means the ingredients for a serious storm are already lining up in the atmosphere. Now here is where it gets more concerning. As of the most recent update, the storm was sitting roughly 835 miles east-southeast of Hilo and just over 1,000 miles from Honolulu. That might sound like a comfortable distance, like the islands have plenty of time to prepare. But storms like this do not need to make a direct landfall to cause chaos. In fact, some of the worst flooding disasters in Hawaii's history have come from storms that never technically touched down on the islands at all. The moisture, the wind, and the ocean swell can all arrive well before, or even without, the center of the storm ever crossing land. So what exactly are forecasters expecting? The official outlook calls for 5 to 10 inches of rain across much of the island chain. That alone would be considered a major rain event almost anywhere else in the world. But the real headline number, the one that should make every resident and every traveler pay close attention, is the maximum potential rainfall of up to 20 inches. 20 inches of rain falling in a matter of days is enough to overwhelm rivers, streams, and drainage systems that were never built to handle that kind of volume. And it is not just about how much rain falls, it is about where it falls. Hawaii's islands are shaped in a way that makes this threat even more dangerous. The terrain is mountainous, with steep slopes rising sharply from the coastline. When moisture-heavy air gets pushed up against those mountains, it is forced upward, cools rapidly, and dumps even more rain than it would over flat land. Meteorologists call this orographic lift, and it is exactly why windward slopes on islands like Maui and the Big Island tend to see the most extreme rainfall totals during storms like this one. The National Weather Service in Honolulu has specifically flagged the Big Island and Maui County as having the highest potential for these dangerous, concentrated downpours. If this all sounds familiar, it is because Hawaii has been here before, and not that long ago either. Back in August of 2024, Tropical Storm Hone passed just south of the Big Island without making a direct landfall. Even so, rain gauges along the windward and southeast-facing slopes recorded staggering totals. Hakalau measured 28.82 inches of rain in just 48 hours. Saddle Quarry recorded 25.03 inches. Mountain View picked up 21.3 inches. Roads were closed, trees and utility poles were knocked down by the wind, and at one point, more than 20,000 customers across the state lost power, with the Big Island bearing the brunt of it. That storm never made landfall, and it still caused that much damage. Keep that in mind as we talk about what could be coming this weekend. Before we go further, if you are finding this breakdown useful, do me a favor and hit that like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who need to see information like this. Officials in Hawaii are not waiting around to see what happens. Honolulu's mayor, Rick Blangiardi, has already spoken publicly about the preparations underway across the city, saying that while there is still uncertainty about exactly what the storm will bring, the window to prepare is getting shorter by the hour. City officials have also made it clear that residents should not assume they are safe simply because the center of the storm might track south of Oahu. The heaviest impacts, they warn, can still be felt, even if the storm's core stays offshore. Let's talk about the timeline, because this is where things move fast. According to the latest forecasts, the heaviest rainfall is expected to reach the Big Island first, arriving as early as Friday. From there, the wet weather is expected to spread westward, hitting Maui by the start of the weekend, and then continuing on to Oahu, Kauai, Lanai, and Molokai as the weekend progresses. So this is not a storm that hits one island and moves on. This is a system that is expected to sweep across the entire Hawaiian island chain over the course of just a few days, leaving very little room for any single island to catch a break. Rain is not the only concern here either. Forecasters are also warning about strong wind gusts, powerful enough to snap tree branches and cause widespread power outages. And here is a detail that a lot of people overlook. When heavy rainfall soaks the ground first, it loosens the soil around tree roots. That makes it significantly easier for strong winds to topple entire trees, not just branches. This combination of saturated ground and gusty winds is exactly the kind of setup that leads to widespread, prolonged power outages, the kind that can last for hours or, in some cases, several days. On top of the wind and the rain, there's also the ocean to think about. Forecasters are tracking a large easterly swell associated with the system, one that could produce surf reaching 15 feet or higher along east-facing shores as the storm approaches. For context, that kind of wave height is considered dangerous even for experienced surfers, and it becomes a serious hazard for anyone near the coastline, whether they are swimming, boating, or simply walking along the shore to take photos of the incoming storm. Now let's talk about why this particular threat, flash flooding and mudslides, tends to be so much more dangerous than people expect. A lot of visitors, and honestly even some residents, associate hurricanes and tropical storms mainly with wind damage. But time and time again, historical data shows that water, not wind, is usually the deadliest part of these storms. Flash floods can happen with alarmingly little warning, turning a calm stream into a raging torrent capable of sweeping away vehicles in a matter of minutes. And in areas with steep terrain, like much of Hawaii's windward coastlines, that same rushing water can trigger mudslides, destabilizing hillsides that have been softened by hours or even days of continuous rainfall. If you are new here, consider subscribing, because we break down developing weather stories like this one as they happen, with the actual data behind the headlines, instead of just fear-driven guesswork. So what should people actually do with this information? Whether they live in Hawaii or have a trip planned there this weekend, the first and most important step is simple. Take official warnings seriously and do not wait until the last moment to prepare. Officials have already urged residents to build or update their hurricane preparedness kits, which should include enough water, non-perishable food, medications, flashlights, and batteries to last several days without power. If you are near low-lying areas or known flood zones, now is the time to think about your evacuation routes, not during the storm itself. For anyone traveling to Hawaii this weekend, it is worth checking directly with your airline and your accommodations before assuming your trip will go exactly as planned. Even if the storm's center stays offshore, the combination of heavy rain, strong winds, and dangerous surf can still disrupt flights, close beaches, and make certain roads impassable. It is far better to have a flexible plan than to arrive expecting sunny skies and find yourself stuck indoors during a flash flood warning. It is also worth remembering that forecasts like this one can and often do shift as the storm develops. The exact track, the exact intensity, and the exact rainfall totals are still being refined day by day, sometimes hour by hour. That is precisely why meteorologists keep repeating the same message. Monitor the latest updates and do not rely on information that is even a day old. A storm that looks like it might pass safely south of the islands today could shift its track tomorrow, and a forecast of 10 inches of rain. And in one area could become 20 inches somewhere else entirely. What makes this particular forecast stand out is not just the raw rainfall numbers, as impressive and alarming as they are. It is the combination of factors all lining up at once. You have a storm strengthening rapidly and consistently, mountainous terrain that is known to intensify rainfall through orographic lift, a track that could bring impacts to essentially every major island rather than just one, and a very recent, very real example from 2024 showing exactly how much damage a storm like this can cause, even without making landfall. When forecasters see all of these elements converging, that is when official language shifts from routine, caution, to genuine urgency. And that shift is exactly what we are seeing right now from agencies like the National Weather Service and the Central Pacific Hurricane Center. At the end of the day, this is still an evolving situation, and nobody, not even the most experienced hurricane specialists, can predict the exact outcome with complete certainty. But the data available right now paints a clear picture of real risk, not manufactured panic. 20 inches of rain, mountainous terrain, island-wide timing, and a track record of similar storms causing serious damage even from a distance. These are not small details to dismiss. Whether you live on these islands, have family there, or are simply planning a trip in the coming days, this is a weekend that deserves your full attention. There is another angle to this story that often gets overlooked once the rain starts falling, and that is the economic side of things. Hawaii's economy leans heavily on tourism, and a storm that disrupts flights, closes beaches, and forces hotels into emergency protocols can ripple far beyond just the immediate weekend. small businesses, tour operators, and local vendors who depend on visitors could all feel the impact long after the wind dies down. This is part of why local officials tend to act early, because the cost of being cautious is almost always smaller than the cost of being caught off guard. It also helps to understand how these tropical systems are actually classified, because the terminology can get confusing fast. A potential tropical cyclone is essentially a system that forecasters believe is very likely to become a tropical depression or tropical storm soon, even if it has not fully organized yet. That designation allows agencies like the National Hurricane Center to issue watches and warnings earlier than they otherwise could, giving residents extra time to prepare instead of waiting for the storm to officially earn a name first. In this case, that early designation is exactly what allowed Hawaii's emergency management teams to start ramping up preparations days before the storm was ever expected to arrive. Another detail worth noting is how spread out this storm's influence already is. Tropical storm force winds were reported extending as far as 275 miles from the center. That is a massive radius, and it explains why officials keep stressing that direct landfall is not required for Hawaii to feel real effects. A storm this wide can brush an entire island chain simply by passing nearby, which is why residents across every island, not just the ones closest to the storm's path, have been told to prepare. We will continue to track this story as new updates come in from official forecasters, so if you want to stay informed with clear, no-nonsense breakdowns like this one, make sure you are subscribed and notifications are turned on. Stay safe out there, and we will see you in the next one.